episode 7. Today we have Dr. Garret Smith, aka the nutrition detective, on the show. Dr. Garret Smith runs a program called the Love Your Liver program, which I highly recommend you check out. Been communicating with Garret for quite a long time, actually. I find him incredibly interesting. Slightly controversial, which is great for this show. In this conversation, we sort of really go into his work and his understanding around nutrition, and also touch on the bile theory. We also go into other kind of alternative diets, such as carnivore and vegetarianism and veganism and all of these topics. We also look at the Weston A Price Foundation, which is something I used to follow quite a lot, and talk about a guy who I followed a lot, Remo Nagel, and sadly he passed a few years ago. And sort of looking at one of the things that was promoted through the Weston A Price Foundation, which is cod liver oil. We touch on vitamin D and other factors as well. Really, really interesting conversation. I'd say strap in, enjoy the ride, and as always, if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. We've got many more interviews coming up in the future, so I don't want you to miss out. And hope you enjoy this one. Dr. Garret Smith, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. How you been?
I'm doing great, man. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Whereabouts are you in America? I know I've seen a few of your posts, but I've never really kind of looked into where you are. Has there been a big change in the weather like we have here? I mean, it's been dark for about 4 hours already.
Oh man, no. So I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and what the funniest thing in terms of the weather that was just a very notable thing to me was on our local news. The weather person was talking about how it was late October, and we were still in. So we do Fahrenheit, right? So we were in triple digits. We were 100 degrees or more here in October, and you could just tell this woman on the news was just flabbergasted just amazed at the weather, just so warm. And then even still, I think this last week we're now in November, and we just hit like low 90s mid to low 90s last week. Is so abnormally warm here. So yeah, it's the weather's definitely not normal. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, we had a similar thing. We had a really wet winter. Really wet summer, and then summer sort of extended, and now we're beginning of November, and it's still sort of semi t-shirt weather. But what's really weird is it's got dark as it does every year. It's getting dark at like kind of about 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Oh, so I was just thinking that the other day that it's getting the darkness seems longer already, longer than normal.
Yeah, that's not ideal. That's not ideal.
No. Global darkening.
Yeah, well, I wanted to sort of jump into. I sent you some sort of points that I wanted to cover, and kind of going into a lot of your work. You're not just sort of trying to debunk the mainstream, of health and wellness and healthcare and diet and nutrition, but also kind of looking into the alternative as well. Because I think that a lot of people that realize that there is an alternative, they sort of go down the same roads and sometimes traps. And sometimes you find that the alternative information can actually be as misleading and dangerous as, the kind of the mainstream, I guess. So you're definitely, looking at your Twitter, I find your Twitter incredibly interesting because you're raring people up. And I don't think there can be something that's posted that you'll see that you wouldn't attempt to debunk if you think it's misleading.
Correct. Yes.
So with the alternative stuff, you often find that people start to question medicine and kind of the allopathic medical paradigm, and also the in terms of nutrition, like the standard American diet, which is kind of, known over here as well. I don't know what we'd call a similar thing, maybe a balanced diet, as people claim, everything in moderation, as they say.
Right.
But when you start to go down that route, you often end up going towards things like veganism or vegetarianism, which I've seen you post a lot about. We've spoke about actually in the past. And something that's new that's come out recently, well, keto, I'd say for a few years, but carnivore as well. So there's all these kind of alternative sort of health movements that they're always arguing is number one. So it starts to become very culty, and if you go on Twitter for 5 seconds, I mean, all you see is all of these different points arguing. But you seem to sort of navigate between everything, and pulling a bit of this and a bit of that, and debunking this, and trying to kind of make sense of everything. So do you want to sort of start there and look at these alternative nutritional paradigms and sort of picking it apart a bit?
Well, I mean, where to begin? The funny thing, so when you get into the conventional, everybody, a lot of people are very, they're learning, or they're experiencing, or they already figured out that the pharma cartel, as I put it, are not on their side. So then they tend to start thinking, okay, well, let's go to the alternative side, the nutrition side, the supplement side, that kind of stuff. And one of the first things they don't know is that the Rockefellers and Merck in particular are what started vitamin science, the fat soluble vitamins, the B vitamins, and that kind of stuff. So, and this is really true. They were looking, they felt at the time, from what I've read, that they were going to kind of run out of pharmaceutical stuff to market. And so they were looking for alternatives to continue making money. And so that's when they were like, how can we make things that are maybe in food? So people don't realize the whole vitamin framework was created by the very people who started pharmaceuticals. And then another thing that people don't get is that it's been said something like 70% of medications, pharmaceutical medications out there, are based on compounds that they found in herbs that caused some certain activity. So people will, they're not understanding that really if all pharmaceutical companies did to these herbal compounds was tweak them slightly so they could patent them. But doesn't that mean, like I always tell people, nobody has an herb deficiency. So if you're using herbs to cause a certain reaction in a body, in a way you're asking for a drug-like effect, right? Because I mean, the drugs are based on the plant compounds, so they both have a similar effect. The herbs may have less side effects, but they're still making your body do something it doesn't want to do, right? It's something your body either couldn't do or it wasn't doing for some reason. Then we're taking something to force it to do that, or to make it to jam it up and cause it to do something. So just these two things, like even if we were to go into something like acupuncture, nobody has an acupuncture needle deficiency. So you start going and and I'm not saying I love acupuncture. I find it super relaxing. Does it help me relax? And I fall asleep on the table? But am I treating anything? Am I treating a root cause by simply putting needles in my body to kind of change the electrical conductivity of my system temporarily? No, we're not fixing any root cause. So I got into this thing of where if we simplify things down, like I always tell people, when you're faced with a health condition, you want to kind of ask questions almost like a 5-year-old would. Like, so when somebody says my elbow hurts because of inflammation, then the 5-year-old question is, well, why is it inflamed? And then they'll say, oh, because there's too much of this. And then you go, why? And then you go, because there's too much, there's not enough of this. And then you go, why? And then we start going, okay, so we get down to it. And for a lot of stuff, you'd get down to eventually where there's either toxicities. This is the part that nobody wants to talk about, the toxicities especially. And then we get into nutrient deficiencies. The toxicities, like I think a lot of people today, a lot of people who don't want to take any accountability or responsibility, the idea that they're toxic, first of all, they take it as like it's offensive. right? How can you say I'm toxic? You're like saying something bad about me. And it's like, no, it's just reality. Like if your car engine needed to be cleaned out, it's dirty. You just need to clean it out, right? So if the body's dirty because of all these things we're being exposed to, we just have to clean it out. But the actual process of fixing somebody's toxicity is time consuming. It requires work. And so what do people who tend to avoid accountability and responsibility hate? They hate work. Yeah. So this is all, and then people have to look past the shiny marketing, because I mean, between the pharmaceutical companies and the nutritional supplement companies and all these doctors and practitioners on both sides, boy, they have a lot of shiny marketing and they make lots of promises. And sometimes people get results for a while. The thing I always tell people is like, look to people's results after 3 to 5 years, because everybody loves to give testimonials like a week or two or a month in, because things are so amazing. And then they often get dropped off and they just slam down into their same old problems, or they get new problems. And then they never associate what they've been doing with the recurrence or the new problems that are showing up. So it's looking long term is something that I do. And when we see things that do wonderful stuff short term, oftentimes it's an absolute disaster long term. And they don't realize that the very thing that causes them the benefit short term is actually, in effect, it causes them the problem long term, because it just wears stuff out, or it uses stuff up, or it makes somebody toxic, or all this stuff. So it's kind of a complex thing, and I try to break it down to make it easy for people, as easy as I can. And I also like to justify my stuff by putting up the science behind it, which is over a lot of people's heads. But I since I'm kind of the forerunner in all of this, I have to make sure that there's evidence to what I'm saying. And then people see it and it makes sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Similar to, I guess, the parallels here with the pharmaceutical industry is you normally find once somebody starts taking one drug, it leads to other side effects, requires another and another. It doesn't seem very dissimilar to supplements. You normally find that people will start with one thing and then it's like, oh yeah, I fixed that, but now this, and before you know it, they're taking 25 a day, which is no different than talking to some, family or friends that are taking 25 medications a day.
Yes. Yeah, I've actually seen that. There's a group out there who they'll start people taking, let's say, B1. And then the people start taking B1 and they feel better in certain ways, but then they get new symptoms. And then the whole group will, like, as a chorus, say, oh, you need B2. And so then they start taking B2. And then that maybe helps fix those side effects. And then they start getting new side effects. And, oh, you need now B12. And it just becomes, like I said, isn't this just like, pharmaceutical medication? And the idea, so before anybody says, well, the B complex is a thing, I always challenge them to go out and find 2 foods that have exactly the same ratios and amounts. Like it can just be a ratio, but no 2 foods have the exact same amount of Bs in them. So the idea that there's this set B complex is absolutely ludicrous. And then when you find out that most B vitamins that they're selling in the supplement stores are derived from stuff like coal tar, and then you start learning about how many medications are from coal tar, it all starts to look very similar. And it's really, I mean, and then the other thing, when you start learning who makes nearly all of the raw materials for supplements, the individual stuff, it's all pharmaceutical companies. So it's just like the foods,
These are questions that I think people, they'll question drugs because it's almost sort of become popular to do. But when you mention these things with supplements, and I've been guilty of it, I've gone through all the rounds over the years, but to actually start questioning where they're coming from as well, that's where you normally start to lose people. So I'd imagine that's where one of the things where you sort of ruffle some feathers.
Oh yeah, with the vitamin D. Oh, so I mean, most people know me about vitamin A toxicity, but the one that's really ruffled feathers now is the vitamin D stuff. where I'm bringing it to people's attention. I've been one of the leaders in bringing it to people's attention that vitamin D is sold as rat poison, mouse and rat poison, and it's a major cause of dogs, especially going into the vets because they ate these rat poison baits, and it sent the dog to the vet with like kidney failure. And there was in South Africa back during the apartheid days, they actually experimented with giving humans vitamin D3 as a potential genocidal tool. And so we start getting into that, and then the people who are into certain theories start going, well, they start thinking they're doing that to us today, and then I start going, yeah, D3 is rat poison, and they're trying to get everybody to take it. They're kind of, if you notice, they're getting a consensus in science now about vitamin D3 being necessary for basically everybody and also being safe and effective. And the doses they're talking about, one big doctor the other day was talking about you could take 50,000 units a day of vitamin D. And I can tell you, I did that I used to do that 1 day a week because I thought I'd be real smart. It's fat soluble. I wanted to take, everybody's taking 5,000. I mean, I was big on this. I tend to get on trends early and figure them out quickly. Like I was back 2013 doing finger prick vitamin D tests in my office. Like I thought it was hugely important to get people on vitamin D, like 10 years ago. And then I finally started noticing that people weren't feeling much better from it. Some of them were getting really, really stiff and their joints hurt and they were achy. And that's from the calcification that vitamin D causes. But then I learned about hair analysis. And when I saw what vitamin D did on hair analysis in terms of cranking the hair calcium way high and the potassium would basically disappear, I totally reevaluated it. And I actually, I've done this several times in my career where I was taught, like most of us were, that these things are good. And then through observation and then really looking through the literature, I realized that they were bad. And now all of a sudden, everybody loves vitamin D. Everybody. The alternative side loved it. Now the conventional side loves it. They got all these studies coming out saying it's great for all this. And I'm going, everybody's ears should be pricking up. But then everybody goes, no, this is a natural thing. You can it should be safe. And I go, the only vitamins that they've ever really told us were dangerous were the fat soluble ones, the ones that can accumulate.
Yeah.
And here we are.
When you take D3, because vitamin D is a hormone, right? So,
oh man,
aren't you stopping or inhibiting the production of natural vitamin D from the sun? So by taking vitamin D, you're actually stopping the production of natural vitamin D. Is that right?
This is a topic that I'm still in the process of figuring out. But one of the ways we can get rid of the body breaks down vitamin A in the skin is by oxidizing it. What is vitamin D? Vitamin D is a type of cholesterol molecule that goes to the skin and it's oxidized. And then supposedly that becomes vitamin D. And there are entire organizations out there, the Marshall Protocol, who are extremely anti-vitamin D, and they feel like they're getting results with people with things like autoimmunity and other chronic problems by having them. I'm not saying I advocate this, but they purposely lower people's vitamin D levels. They will keep them out of the sun. They will not have them eat foods with vitamin D. They will have them strictly avoid vitamin D supplements. And they definitely get some results. I don't know that all of that is necessary. I don't think that avoiding the sun is necessary. Like in my mega vitamin D, all I'm saying is cholecalciferol and calcitriol. So those are the two main vitamin D compounds that we talk about in the human body. Vitamin D3 is cholecalciferol, and then calcitriol is the 1,25 dihydroxy vitamin D3. It's also called the active form of vitamin D3. Well, we're talking about it's an alcohol. That's why it's cholecalciferol with an OL at the end. It is an alcohol. And so then people will say, well, it's a corticosteroid hormone. the chemical classification is one thing. What we do know, what we'll see a lot of, and this is in the research, they measure the storage form of vitamin D. When they do blood tests on vitamin D, they measure the storage form, 25-hydroxycholecalciferol or 25-hydroxy-vitamin D3. They say that that's the storage form. And then they make this giant leap, this assumption, as I say, that if you have enough in storage, you have to have enough in storage to have enough of the active form. Okay? The calcitriol or the 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. But here's the weird thing in the research. If you start going and looking at chronic disease studies of vitamin D, what they'll find is that maybe their storage vitamin D, the normal stuff they measure, is normal to low. But then when they look at the active stuff, it's it's out of range high. And these people are basically calcifying. So what another gentleman out there put out that there's something like 25 different forms of vitamin D they found in the body. Well, why aren't we looking at all of them? And why has science decided that one of these is the one we're going to look at versus the other ones? And so I just kind of start going, I tend to simplify things. It's complex enough out there as it is. What do I believe humans need? We need sunlight or ultraviolet B. We need a certain amount of light. So I don't deny that humans need light to be healthy. I think that's why we're hairless, because our bodies like the sun. So we want sun or UVB. And then what do I know that in the literature, things that have been shown to raise vitamin D that aren't sunlight or are not vitamin D itself? Zinc will raise vitamin D and magnesium will raise vitamin D.
Yeah.
Do I know that there are epidemic deficiencies of magnesium and zinc all around the world? Absolutely. So what do I work on first? I tell people, get your sun, get your magnesium, get your zinc. And so we work on those, and I know those are all good for people. I know skipping the rat poison is a good idea too. So
where do you stand on boron? Because I think boron doubles the half-life of vitamin D as well. Is that something
Boron is something that I have personally used in the past. I do not use it anymore. If this is where we start looking at long-term research, we do know that boron does accumulate in people. It does actually accumulate in the testes. And the long-term studies and the high-dose studies in rodents show that over time it tends to cause infertility. So like the big study on boron, where guys like to talk about boron raising free testosterone or whatever, it was on, I think it was either Iran or Iraq, but it was on a small group of guys, and it was a 10-day study. So I kind of went over this. I go over some of these theories on some of my posts when I'm able to, but so imagine this. If, let's say, boron theoretically was not good for the testes, but it raised testosterone short term, and I think I had some long-term studies showing it lowered testosterone in rodents too. So how could it do both? How could it raise your testosterone short term and lower it long term? Well, let's just think about this. Let's say the certain testicle cells make testosterone, which would mean they have it inside of them. So let's say something was to come and destroy those cells, break those cells open. You spill out the testosterone. So in the short-term 10-day study, you can see that it raises testosterone drastically at a higher dose. Long-term, it's a problem. It keeps destroying cells. So then all of a sudden, then you run out of cells, or the cell amount gets less, and then you don't make it as much anymore, and your sperm is just destroyed. And so I don't use boron.
No.
Boron, actually, an interesting thing I just found in a study that shows me that the body does not like it is the body will shove boron into bone. It also shoves lead into bones. And so some of the things that people will say builds bone or increases bone density, let's say strontium, which is a radioactive mineral they're now giving to people in supplements to try to raise their bone density, or boron, the body with certain toxic metals, and neither strontium or boron are essential for us to live. We do not need any boron. As far as they know, it is not an essential nutrient. It will shove it into bone if that's where it fits. And then the giveaway that the body doesn't like it is as soon as somebody stops taking an excess amount of that mineral, the body dumps it out of the bone as quick as it can. And it does the same thing for strontium and boron. Wow. So it tries to get rid of it. It doesn't try to hold on to it. So these are just signs. These are some of the ways that I evaluate whether it's needed or beneficial or not. So
yeah. So you're looking at how it reacts in the body, listening to the body, as opposed to just following the literature or following the,
Or as they say, like if you want to know, if you want to really evaluate a person, right, watch what they do, don't watch what they say. So we can kind of look in the literature as to what it does, especially long term, right? Because somebody could, well, if we're talking about people here, you could watch somebody for one day and they could be on their best behavior, right? But long term, you're going to catch where they slip or where they start showing their true selves. That's the same thing. We always want to do it in the research with. We want to look long term. So we prefer humans over animals. We prefer long term over short term. And we always prefer in the whole body or in vivo versus cell studies in vitro. Like we just prioritize these things. And there's people out there in the world who they throw away all the epidemiological studies, right? Where they're looking at large groups of people and they're asking them questions. And I say, okay, you could throw out like an individual epidemiological study, but I don't know if you've seen my eggs thread on Twitter.
Yeah.
Where I go into all these diseases in all these different countries, and they're showing that eggs cause health problems, egg yolks especially, in all country after country and disease after disease, especially major diseases. And how can we ignore that, right? So it's like once you get the weight of it and you put it all together, and then I even go into the mechanisms of how this can cause disease based on the framework that I work within. And people want to do the scapegoat of cholesterol, and I don't even talk about cholesterol in that whole thread. Yeah. So it's just, we have to be able to, if people don't have a good framework to go on, doing this is very hard. And so once we kind of lay out the framework of like vitamin A as retinol is an alcohol, vitamin D, cholecalciferol is an alcohol, vitamin E is an alcohol, tocopherol, tocotrienols, we start going, are alcohols really vitamins? When they go through the exact same, we look at the detox pathways. What do alcohols go through to detox? Well, they go through alcohol dehydrogenase and aldehyde dehydrogenase. So if you drink alcohol, ethanol, what we call alcohol, it goes through the exact same detox pathway. So are we going to say that the detox pathway for a poison we know, which is alcohol, but it puts 3 different vitamins through the same detox pathway, and we're going to say that that's something we need? Right? It's just some of it's just logic that we just want to make sense out of. And so the vitamin D thing is a big topic. So I just simplify it to the things like the sunlight and the magnesium and the zinc. And then we just go from there. So
so you're obviously getting into the intricacies of these sort of toxins and the poisons in our environment and in our food. Do you ever chill out and have a cheat? Do you ever have a drink? Okay.
Oh, yes. I am not perfect. I have never said I was perfect. Actually, in this process, I am not perfect. I am flawed. And I never told people. So this is one of the things that I think people could easily misinterpret from my work. It's not that people have to be perfect. Like there is no such thing as a toxin-free life.
Yeah.
But like, as I've learned through some of the stuff that I've done where I was trying to kick bad habits, let's say, or bad food habits, or even like coffee habit. We get addicted to these things, not because they're good for us, but precisely because they're poisons.
Yeah.
And the thing about these poisons or these addictive substances is you almost never see people like just slowly reducing their intake, right? People only generally increase their intake until at some point it becomes too big a problem in their life, and then they try to go to zero.
Yeah.
Or they try to reduce, and that never works, right? Trying to cut your dose in half or a quarter or whatever, it never works. You just slowly ramp back up. And most of the time, if people don't get rid of it all, it slowly ramps back up. It crawls back in. So is there, like, I even tell people there's no such thing as a vitamin A free diet. Researchers have said this forever. Like, I don't want people to eat vitamin A. We try to, the terms I use is we reduce or we minimize it. You can't avoid it. People who try to avoid it actually cause themselves bigger problems because they miss out on too much other nutrition by trying to minimize the vitamin A. And even meat is very low in vitamin A, but it's not zero. And meat is like the foundation of what we do. So I have people who are carnivores doing the program. I'm not anti-carnivore. I just like for carnivores to try to work in some soluble fiber somewhere so they can bind up their bile and poop it out, because that's how we get rid of toxic stuff. So no, I'm not perfect. I've been but there's been times in this process where I've been better. There's been times where I've slipped more. But yeah, no, it's the idea is not to become a hermit.
Yeah.
And I go out.
I'm always at work, and friends and family are always sort of saying, because I'm quite strict in general.
Mm-hmm.
My diet's probably a bit different than yours, but I'm quite careful with toxins, and we distill our water, we have air purifier, all of these things. And they're always sort of like, do you not ever just live your life? And I'm like, I'll have a cheat every now and then, but I don't necessarily find happiness in cheating.
Yes.
Right. I do enjoy it, but that's not what makes me happy. I think as a man, and I can only speak as a man, I think that there should be happiness in being disciplined.
Yes.
And having the willpower to be able to, set a goal and stick to it. And, they say the way you do anything is the way you do everything. But then every now and then I will, I don't necessarily have cheat days, but I'll have like a cheat meal and I'll go hard and I enjoy it and I'll get all the sides. But the reason I ask, one thing I've done recently is I've quit drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of people lately. It's definitely becoming more of a thing, I think, more acceptable socially.
Yes.
But I've seen some mad transformations in people that I know that didn't even necessarily have a drinking problem, but when they did drink, they drank a lot, and their lives were just not where they needed to be. And since cutting out, we're talking 100 days, one of them 6 months. I've got a friend who's not done it for 2 years, and they start to really find out who they are. And I was looking at why I drink, and I don't drink a lot, but I can drink. I've got the Irish blood. I can drink. My stag do was in Ibiza a couple of months ago, and man, I drank. But when I got back, I was like, that's it now. I've done it. I got that out of my system. I'm done. But when I was looking at why I drink, I know there's some growth in getting past that, if that makes sense. But I only drank once a week or so, and I really would reflect on my life and where I've come. And because I am so strict, I'd relax a little bit. And I've started to sort of question, why do I need a drink to relax? Or why do I need a drink to reflect positively? And starting to ask these questions. So that's why I sort of touch on that. But yeah, I think, I look at people like Saladino. I've seen you spoke about him as well, and I won't even get started on liver because we'll be here for 5 hours talking about that alone. But that guy, I mean, take a chill pill, man. I mean, Jesus,
yes,
it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I talked to somebody in my group, actually met him personally in private, and he was apparently he is very much like that in real life. It's not just the internet persona. They like. It was extreme. Like there's disciplined, and then there's like rigidity where it's neuroticism, if you want to call it that. And that's one thing that, so kind of to your note, being a contrarian like I am, right? It's almost like the contrarian in me would fight being perfect, right?
Yeah.
Because like that my normal people think my persona is like perfection, and so I would tend to violate that just so I could be like, screw you, I'm not perfect. But I'm doing that in my private life, so it really doesn't matter. They don't know.
Yeah.
But I finally, kind of like you were saying, I got to the point where I realized like I'm not doing, like, cheating is not somehow proving anything to everybody else, right? Because I was not showing it to everybody else. And I finally went, well, if it's all for me, I don't need to cheat for me, right? I can just not do it. And the whole relaxing thing, yeah, that's a very interesting thing. Like, why do I need a drink to relax when then I know that like it'll ruin my sleep?
Yeah.
And then as one guy, there was this one Instagram video once where a guy was saying basically after you drink, you're slightly depressed until you drink again.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, that hit me harder than anything. And then I just started looking at like, yeah, what am I drinking for? Why am I drinking? I know it's straight poison. I don't need it to be social. And so that's where a lot of this is coming. There's actually a big development coming inside my Love Your Liver program, where I've been experimenting with. I don't want to mention it here, but it's a very specific nutrient that fits with the vitamin A kind of detox protocol that I do, and it has taken. It's helping my body to realize what is actually good for it and what isn't. And so I'm losing, like, one of the things I would still cheat on in my kind of framework was I would still have mustard on occasion. Like, mustard is something that's very bright yellow. It's bitter. It's like not, it's generally marked. It's a poisonous thing. It smells a lot. It's bitter. It's yellow. It's like got all the markers of it, but I still love mustard. And I was like, you know what? I do everything else so well. I'm going to eat some freaking mustard.
Yeah.
And I started doing this new thing within the program. And all of a sudden the last 2 days I was like, I don't want to eat mustard. And so I didn't put it on. And it's really cool because what we're seeing is as we get people cleaner, as they're able to detox better, as they have less of these poisons in them, they want fewer poisons.
Yeah.
Like, people lose their taste for sugar. Like, they might still eat some fruit here and there, but they lose their taste for added sugar. The alcohol, the coffee's usually the last one to go. I will second that. Coffee is a really, really hard one to let go of.
It makes life easier.
Well, it makes life easier. One guy on Twitter said to me that he said coffee kind of, what he realized it did for him was it numbs him to like the pace of life. It's like we kind of know that this pace of life is artificial and like too fast. And so the coffee just puts us into that, like, that gear. Yeah. And we need it to kind of be in that gear because it's not a natural gear for us. And I went, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that's why it's so hard to get off of. If that's true, that's part of why it's so hard to get off of. But it's also just I appreciate that people have rituals in the morning. Like, if
mine's ritual.
Yeah, you wake up and you want something hot to drink and stuff like that. And so what I did this last week, I used to not want to make hot water because, you put the kettle on and it's going to be like super hot by the time it's whistling. And then you just got super hot water and you got to wait for it. And so I got one of those glass, automatic water heaters, the kettles that are just easy. And now I started having, this sounds crazy, and I used to think this was crazy too, but I'm just having hot water. And
it's something I would approve of you, I think, on that one.
Like, see, you chuckle at it because it's. I used to think it was totally crazy. I'd be like, why would I ever just drink hot water? And then I started having it more, and there is actually a guy around the turn of the century. His big healing diet was just red meat and hot water. And he supposedly helped people a lot with it. And all I know from all the alternative, like, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine stuff that was going on before they had a lot of these analysis methods, was that they all associate digestion with warmth. Like your fire, your internal fire of your digestion is how strong your digestion is. And so the idea was you put warm things down there because we're warm blooded, right? So if you put cold food down in your guts, your body has to completely change the temperature of that. So it's in, if you want to call it in harmony or whatever. And I just went, hot water, like what do they give us here in America, right? It's all ice. Everything's iced. And it's almost like designed to shut down our digestion. So the warm water thing, I mean, I just thought, again, like about alcohol, why do I need alcohol to relax? Like, why do I need coffee in my hot water? You know what I mean? Or why do I need tea in my hot water? Why can't I just drink hot water? And then I get the ritual.
Yeah. Do you know, I used to, when I was sort of 15, 16 or whatever, I was smoking. All of my mates did it, you know. And when I turned 18, it must have been about 6 months after, they brought in the smoking ban in England. So you had to go outside, basically. And I decided I wanted to quit. So I used that time. And what I did is I used to go outside with the smokers, but I wouldn't smoke. And then when I come in, psychologically, I've kind of ticked off that ritual. So I felt, you know, and it was so easy. It was honestly so easy. I just sort of got past it very quickly. And, you know, because it's the ritual. I don't think, you know, obviously there are addictive compounds, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm addicted to coffee. It is the ritual. It's not only that, but it's the programming. You know, if you look at any movie or, you know, any TV show or whatever, coffee, alcohol, cigarettes, you know, so it's that psychological thing. So I think it's definitely something there as opposed to actually needing.
Yeah. There's the fitting in part of it. You know, it's like I try to tell people, like, if something is sold on every corner, it's bad for you, right? It's like they don't want us to be happy and healthy. So I tell them, like, chocolate, sugar, coffee, alcohol, like it's sold everywhere. These things are not good for you.
Yeah.
If it's in a convenience store, it's probably bad.
Do you eat chocolate?
Oh, actually, no. No, that was one of the things that I was actually found easy to give up. Yeah. Chocolate is extremely high in copper. I consider copper to be a toxic metal, and it's really high in oxalates. And I always just tell people, like, get as dark a chocolate as you can and eat it. And they eat it and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, so are you eating it for the chocolate or are you eating it for the sugar?
Yeah.
And then they realize that the you know, the bitter taste of chocolate, and when I explain to them that's really toxins, that's why chocolate's so bitter, and the polyphenols. People don't get, like, polyphenols. Those are supposedly the plant antioxidants, right? And phenol is a known toxin. So then polyphenol, multiple phenols, is not going to be good for us, right? And then it's in the name, right? But people go, oh no, they're plant antioxidants. And I go, nope, they're poisons. They're pesticides made by the plant. So like I was explaining it to my kids the other day, my daughter, she's a dancer, and sometimes she has a little bit of coffee when she has, like, a really hard dance day coming up where she has to memorize a lot of choreography. And I'm okay with her using it, you know, performance enhancing substances. Like, if we were talking about a little bit of coffee, I mean, I think she drinks like a third of a cup of coffee. That's all she needs. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, if that's all you need, and she only uses it on the rare occasion when she needs it. Life is life. Like, life is survival and competition, right? We can't get around that. So a little bit of an advantage used properly, I don't see any problem with that. But she's like, I don't like the taste of coffee. I'm like, that's good. And she said, that's why I add she's catching on to what I'm saying. She's like, that's why I add whatever the dairy or the sugar and whatever, because I'm trying to cover up the taste of the coffee. Yeah. Right? Isn't that all? Well, that's what we're all trying to do with coffee and chocolate. And I started doing stuff like, when people realize that they're really taking it as a drug. Yeah. You know, you start to see, as hardcore users of compounds go, like, they start seeing if they have certain goals or whatever. Like, let's say somebody wants to keep a decent physique, but they want to drink coffee and they want to drink alcohol and whatever, they start actually moving towards the pure drug, right? They move towards, like, the clear liquors without all the sugar in it. They move towards the black coffee. They move towards the straight drug. And that's when you know both the problem's getting a little deeper and you realize how bad it is for you with all the other crap we add to it.
Well, it's just, same with alcohol. You know, if, like, you know, you get these alcohol-free beers.
Yes.
What is it? I get it if you're out with friends and it makes life a little bit easier. You know, have a couple of them and then you can drive home. But it's disgusting. No one likes the taste of beer. I'm not having. After 2 or 3, you can tolerate the taste. But I think it's the same with sugar as well. Sugar is one of the easiest to get away from because, like, if you have coffee and you have 2 sugars in your coffee, and you take the sugar out, you know, it won't be pleasant for a small period of time. But when you add it back in, you're like, you know, the contrast of taste is horrendous. So if someone put a sugar in my tea or coffee, it's horrendous. And if you cut out the chocolate and then you eat chocolate a month later, the sugar is so overbearing.
Yeah.
I feel like naturally it's actually not very difficult. One of the main issues though is sugar, same as like seed oils, it's sort of snuck in everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So you almost can't really get away from it. Like, you know, like the vitamin A thing, I guess. You know, if you want to eat out, if you don't have time to cook all of your food all of the time and control everything, you're gonna have seed oils and you're gonna have sugar here and there. It's one of those things. What are, just on that point really quickly, because I wanted to segue into the Weston A Price stuff.
Okay.
Because I like your views on all that, but what are your sort of views on seed oils? Because that's become like a mania now, hasn't it?
Seed oils. Well, so there's a lot of issues. I mean, seed oils are the PUFA thing, the polyunsaturated fatty acids. I mean, okay. What do I do for people's livers? Generally, fats. Like I've said this before, in a natural, I don't like to use the word paleo just because it's so associated with that specific diet, but what I call a natural living human. A natural living human eating, like, not, let's say not with, they don't have agriculture. They're not growing stuff for their own. They're not picking their own plants and hybridizing them and maximizing certain qualities of them. There is so little fat to be found in a natural living diet from somebody who's living in relatively warm places, which is where humans are designed to be, right? We're not born with tons of hair on us. We're not made for the cold weather. We can live in cold places. That doesn't mean we're designed for it, right? So you think of wild game, like there's no fat on those. You can see their ribs, right? You think of grains and legumes, like if people are eating them, they're not going to have any fat. You think of fruits and vegetables, they don't have any fat. And then if you think of, if you were out there trying to hope and pray that you found enough nuts and seeds to eat, and then you have to shell it all and do all that stuff, you may get some fat. And then people will bring up avocados, and I'm like, that is avocados. I swear avocados are from another planet. Like, they just don't make any sense. You know, they're the only fruit that's like just all fat. Right? They're so weird. I swear they're from an alien planet. So when you think of that, there's not much fat available in a quote unquote natural living diet, especially people will say, but in one animal there's this much fat, and I go, but if you divide that one animal against among however many people are in a tribe or a group, there's not going to be much at all. Yeah. So where's all the fat coming from? So I tend to think that a lot of our problems, now I'm not a low fat, like, crazy person. What I tell people is I say, just eat the fat that's in the foods. Like, if you're eating red meat and there's fat in it, and it's not like a factory farm kind of thing, if there's fat in it, just eat the fat. That's supposed to be there. But don't go and add tons of fats. And I'm talking about, don't add tons of, like, we think of it as minimize added fats, right? So then we get into the industrial seed oils, and if I kind of like my approach in terms of it simplifies it, is we don't have to obsess on the types of fats when we're generally minimizing added fats, right? So if somebody goes to a restaurant and they order a steak, the chance of a bunch of seed oils being on the steak is minimal, right? Yeah. So the seed oil problem can be, industrial seed oils have not improved health in any way, other than bringing more calories that are available, which is, most people don't need that these days. So the seed oils are an issue. We get into the PUFAs, the polyunsaturated fatty acids, but people don't realize that so they talk about polyunsaturated fatty acids oxidizing, right? And then causing problems. the craziest thing that as I've been figuring out in my work, what they turn into is they turn into malondialdehyde. They turn into an aldehyde. And I talk a lot about aldehydes, and the enzyme that breaks them down is aldehyde dehydrogenase. This is such a key enzyme to everybody's health. Malondialdehyde has actually been shown. There was one little study where it irreversibly inhibited or kind of shut down aldehyde dehydrogenase for a period of time. So now you have something that has to be detoxed, but it actually shuts down the detox enzyme. So then we get into if PUFAs make that. This is actually how they measure like what they call lipid peroxidation, which is a huge marker of disease in many studies. So anyway, they look at this malondialdehyde, but then nobody in the PUFA world is just talking about it. They're just talking about PUFAs. And when you start talking about aldehydes, we get into, well, do you know that alcohol, when it's metabolized, it turns into acetaldehyde. When you take in vitamin A, whether it's carotenoids like the orange or yellow from like carrots or mangoes or whatever, carotenoids from plants break down into 2 retinaldehydes. If you take in animal vitamin A from retinol, it has to turn into retinaldehyde before it can be processed further. There's aldehydes in cumin aldehyde, in the spice cumin. Vanilla, the flavor of it is vanillin, but it's a vanilla aldehyde. There's all sorts of aldehydes out there. There's a lot of foods that contain a lot of formaldehyde.
Yeah,
like, have you ever, what's that?
I was going to say, yeah, formaldehyde. Yeah,
formaldehyde. So all of these aldehydes go through ALDH. There's a family of ALDH, but it's all the general family of ALDH, aldehyde dehydrogenase. So PUFAs just add to that, and it's like one of the most, if you want to say it, damaging enzyme or damaging products to the very detox thing that breaks it down. So I talk about aldehydes a lot and aldehyde dehydrogenase a lot. Other people just say PUFAs are bad. And I'm like, that's cool, they are, but if we want to know why, it's the malondialdehyde they turn into. So, which fits into my whole toxic bile theory and how we're trying to fix the liver. So seed oils are bad, but excessive fat is really, we are not designed for these excessive fat diets. There's no natural diet that makes sense for us to be super high fat. And when you look at, people will bring up the Eskimo or the Inuit, and when you look at pictures of them, they all have what we call hypothyroid face. They all have kind of the moon face, and they're very puffy and they're very swollen, which is, not something that we're necessarily after. Can humans survive in those conditions? Yes, but just because somebody lives there doesn't mean their diet is like, you don't hear about Inuit and Eskimo longevity. We'll put it that way. They're not known to live a long time. So we just kind of like, I just tell people, like, if there's fat in the food, go ahead and eat it. But be very careful with your added fats. So we just kind of eliminate that whole problem right there. But yeah, PUFAs are bad. I don't particularly, I think rather than like some of the obnoxious people who are going to go into restaurants and ask them to like leave the seed oils out of everything, and then the chefs are like, I don't know what to cook with anymore because I don't have anything to cook with. Like, what I'm teaching my kids is I'm like, don't eat deep fried stuff. Like, deep fried stuff is generally bad for you. Will my kids order it sometimes? Yes, but I'm letting them know right now that, like, when you get older and you're trying to, like, let's say watch your weight, or you don't want to get fat like everybody else, like, deep fried foods, throw them out. Like, just avoid them. Yeah. They're watching me at restaurants, and I'm getting, mostly protein dishes and no deep fried stuff. And it's just, I think it's not, a lot of these things are not so hard to avoid. I'm not going to go in and try to make the restaurant change. I'm just going to order around the restaurant. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, all the industrial oils, like, I don't care. The less industrial oils you eat, the better off you're going to be. That's just, I don't care whether it's a PUFA or a MUFA or a saturated fat. So, yeah. But PUFAs are probably the worst. Yeah.
Do you try to stick to the kind of lower fat cuts of meat? And because you talk a lot about, well, you've mentioned chicken a few times, and I've heard you speak quite a lot about chicken, and I think the leaner beef and things like this. Is that sort of what you tend to go for?
I don't necessarily, I mean, yes, if I had certain goals, I might tend to pick the leaner cuts of meat. I mean, I had some, like I used to like chicken skin and stuff like that. I don't really want it anymore. Like I said, I don't worry too much about the fat that's in the food.
Yeah.
If it's in the food, I'm not fretting about it. If it's added,
Unless
then
it's factory farmed.
Sorry, what was that last thing?
Unless it's like factory farmed, or because that's where a lot of the fat contains a lot of the toxins, right?
Yes.
So are you quite careful with where you get your meat from?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I always advocate that. I mean, generally the two meats that we use in my approach, the two types of meat, if you want to say that, is just red meats. So people can use different types of red meats. I know there's actually a lot more out there than Americans are typically aware of. And then poultry, generally, chicken or turkey, or if people are into duck or whatever, but ducks are really fatty.
Yeah, I eat a lot of lamb, which is really fatty.
Oh, I love lamb. Oh man, my family loves lamb. I wish I had it more often here. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have it probably 3 times a week, I've got to say.
Wow.
Yeah. The thing with lamb as well is a lot of the time it's grass fed and it's more natural. It's not like, I don't think you can sort of, put them in some sort of industrial setting, so you often find they are grass fed a lot cleaner. So, but it's very fatty. So I actually do eat quite a lot of fat, which I think about a lot. I tend to do quite well on it, but I am quite, I listen to your work and I'm quite cautious of, it's in my head now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you were to just like what I might do if I got a steak that looked fattier than I liked, I might cook it, and I just don't like, as opposed to my father, if there's like a piece of, a big old chunk of fat in the middle of the steak, I'm going to cut it off and I'm not going to eat it. Like my dad would eat the whole thing. Right?
I'd eat yours as well, I think.
Yeah. if it's a bit of fat, I don't mind it, but it's like, I'm just going to look at it and I'm going to be like, that's a big chunk of fat. I'm just going to skip it now. So that's all. It's nothing crazy. Like I'm not trimming off all the fat on a steak. I'm just not eating the big chunks of it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, I guess that sort of leads us to the topic I've mentioned a few times, which is the Weston A Price stuff, because there's some things that you say, because I spent a lot of time looking into Weston A Price and I followed the diet for a long time as well. So I think there's some things that you're not a million miles away from. I think people could assume that you're probably, anti-meat because you're talking about organs and things like that, but you're not at all. You are clear on that at times. But with the Weston A Price stuff, is a lot of what they say is the complete opposite to what you do as well. So what led you to that? I'm guessing you got into Weston A Price and then you found your own way. Is that what it was?
I actually was a presenter at the Weston Price convention in 2010. I was actually invited to present there on nightshades back then. So nightshades was kind of my first, one of the first food things that I was really figuring out. For those, some people may know about nightshades. They're tomato. Generally, the short list is tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, or capsicum, and eggplant. And they are all like quite inflammatory. A lot of them actually contain, funny thing, a lot of people know them as inflammatory, but they contain a lot of vitamin A. Many of them contain like some of the highest amounts of vitamin A out there, like tomatoes and peppers. They contain, most of them contain vitamin D, like a food-based vitamin D. They actually contain the active form, a lot of them, the calcitriol, which will just start calcifying you. And a lot of people know that when they eat these foods, they get very stiff. They contain these toxic glycoalkaloids like solanine and chaconine, and it sent entire schools of children to the hospital when they stored the potatoes wrong, and then it sent entire schools of children to hospitals. I think that was actually in either Scotland or it might have been an Irish school. So, but I accumulated all this research, and they had me come and speak, and I was into the Weston Price stuff in general. I did the whole like Agenus Vonderplanets thing. I don't know if you've heard of that, the primal diet, where it's like all raw. So I kind of got into these things around the same time. It was like the raw eggs, raw dairy, raw liver, raw meat, very few vegetables. I still ate some, but yeah, so it was kind of those two overlap. So it was kind of the Weston A Price, the heavy dairy, heavy organ meats, heavy, all that stuff. And then the Agenus, Vonderplanitz, primal diet stuff was just the raw stuff. So when people are like, when I have like raw diet people come to me now, I'm like, yeah, I did that. Been there, done that. Yeah. But what did I see in my time with the Weston Price thing? When I went to the convention, I mean, I went to some of the local meetings and I went to the national convention. And what did I see at those meetings? I saw, I'm going to generalize here, but I saw people who were either really overweight or really underweight. The people who had been in there the longest were kind of the furthest along that spectrum. When I went to the convention, I did not see health. I did not see like people who I wanted to be like in terms of health at that convention. Yeah. So I started kind of losing my, the shine on it. And as I went along, I started questioning. At first, the vitamin D thing came where I started questioning that, and cod liver oil. And then over time, I started getting into the vitamin A thing, the vitamin A toxicity, and questioning that. And then now we're into the PUFAs and the oxidized fats, and and then there was the rash of high up people in the Weston Price area dying of brain cancer, which is a known association with oxidized fatty acids, of which if somebody was eating, which these people supposedly was like the fermented cod liver oil. Cod liver oil doesn't ferment. It only oxidizes. Carbohydrates ferment. Fats don't ferment. So
isn't the omega-3 or the DHA or whatever it is in the fish, isn't that to preserve the life of the fish in cold water? So essentially,
it's so they can swim. Because if they had saturated fats, they'd stiffen up.
So when you take it out of the cold environment, which obviously it has to, at least with transportation, by that very sort of process, it will start to go rancid, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So when they were doing there was some reports on these fermented cod liver oil places, and they were saying that the place that the vats were in a very warm area, like where they were letting it sit. And I can't imagine the smell there. Oh my goodness. Fish oil, I mean, is very related to flax oil, and flax oil, it just like when they use it as like wood finish and stuff like that, it's crazy. So, but yeah, cod liver oil and Weston Price, like, so I have Weston Price people, like, I mean, I have multiple either current or ex chapter leaders from Weston Price chapters who work with me now.
Wow.
Like some of them are still in it, and they're still trying to help people, but they've realized that they got really sick and they weren't getting better, and they started seeing especially as I started pointing out that kids who get too much vitamin A and vitamin D in the research and in real life get very, very allergic. And so people in these groups started noticing that their kids were like super allergic, and that's why the Weston Price groups got into GAPS. Right. Yeah. GAPS is like the super restricted and all this stuff. GAPS was coming about because so many of their kids were allergic and they couldn't figure it out. And they just keep giving them more. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you about GAPS because I think she was a Weston A Price speaker as well. But her diet isn't so much focused on, things like the cod liver oil and the organs and stuff. It's more broths and it's more kind of natural, I guess you could argue Weston A Price is natural, but it's more realistic, I think, maybe.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have a lot of people, somebody brought it up on my Twitter the other day about have you looked into the work of Weston Price and cod liver oil and all that stuff? And if you want me to read the quotes here, I can, but I actually went through Weston Price's work, and I found 3 quotes from him about how cod liver oil could be he called it injurious to children if they got too much over time, and how some kids developed allergic problems on it, and that kids would fight and kick and scream to avoid having to take it. And he said the only reason that basically a person would do this is if they knew it was bad for them. And I'm just sitting there going, at what point do we not acknowledge that this guy, back in the days when things were a lot less toxic and there was a lot less supplementation and all these health foods and all this stuff, these kids were showing problems. And now today, everybody's more toxic. And we have allergy problems through the roof. And we're just going to ignore, like, that. They'll just disregard that Weston Price said these things. And I'm like, this is like the tip of the iceberg. He was just telling you the early problem back then. And now we're at this point. So can these things help in the meantime? I mean, yes, like we talked about caffeine. If somebody had to stay up to drive at night, having a cup of coffee may save their life. Like that's the proper use of it, let's say. But if people know that if they keep drinking coffee over and over, it makes them tired. This is something I called this the duration paradox. And it's where something that has a short-term effect will often have the opposite effect long-term. So something that helps you with energy like caffeine short-term, it will ruin your energy long-term. Like something like alcohol, it makes you seem a little happier and a little looser and a little more relaxed short-term. What does it do long-term? It makes you more depressed. Right? So these things happen. This is like a drug-like effect. So we see the same thing with cod liver oil and these other things where they might have an effect short-term to help some people, but long-term they accumulate. This is what we know about fat-soluble toxins, and they cause problems. So, but yeah, if you want me to read those quotes, I'm happy to. But otherwise, we could could link the thread in there.
Nah, if you got them, let's have it. Let's go.
Okay, cool. Here. So okay, let me find it. Oh man, hold on. I lost it for 1 sec. Twitter decided to refresh on me.
Just while you're looking for it, do you think so? The Ramel Nagel thing.
Go ahead.
With Ramel Nagel, obviously with a brain tumor, and I think there was a couple of others as well. Do you think that could be a result of cod liver oil as well as the diet overall, or do you think it is just the cod liver oil?
Oh, I think it's the diet overall, and I think the fermented cod liver oil was a major part of it, and that would simply go along in the research with oxidized fish oils. Like oxidized fish oils, I've actually posted, I think, the research on oxidized fish oils, oxidized EPA, DHA, the PUFAs, and brain cancer. It's in the literature. So they were taking an oxidized fish oil supplement daily
for years,
and then they saw this.
No, I did one bottle. I think I did it for, I don't know, 3 months, and I was just thinking, this just doesn't feel right, and the smell of it, the taste of it. So I found myself sort of skipping days, and yeah, I didn't want it enough in the end, so I sort of packed it in. But I do look back and I do worry a little bit about that period, that I was taking it. But when you look at these guys, they were taking them, a lot for a long period of time.
Oh yeah, one example I have about cod liver oil and what it does on a hair test. So I had a woman who took a tablespoon of cod liver oil, regular cod liver oil, a tablespoon a day or something for like 5 years. Now on a hair test, I want a hair calcium level of about 40. And so when people come to me with high calcium these days, they might be in the 80s, 90s, 100, maybe 150. A couple people might be 200s. This woman came to me with a hair calcium of 700. She was pumping. She was basically losing that much calcium. I'm going to tell you where it was coming from. It was coming out of her bones.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. She's not eating that much calcium.
Right. So it's just coming out of her bones. Yeah.
But
I've posted research on. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say. So obviously we'll go into this, but vitamin D, and we mentioned coffee as well. I know there's a compound within coffee and tea as well. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Tannins, I think.
Tannins, yes.
Which pulls calcium, because it doesn't balance the acidity and the blood sugar levels, and it pulls calcium from the bone, ends up in the blood, and then you end up it calcifies. It ends up in the joints, in the tissues, and
well, tannins are another, like I mentioned polyphenols earlier. Tannins are a part of the family of like phenolics, the polyphenols. So they fit into the same stuff that I say is not good for us. Yeah. So let me read this. So this is from one of the scientific journal papers that Weston A Price published. Here we go. Quoting: I have frequently had mothers bring this question to me as a serious nutritional problem with their children. They had desired to do all they possibly could for their children and, in their efforts, had tried to follow the directions on the bottle or as otherwise provided, which often meant large doses of cod liver oil. They have reported to me the difficulty they had in combating the rebellion of their children against the use of cod liver oil, which may have been part of a reaction of self-preservation. Many of the children were reported to regurgitate the oil when it was forced down. Since it has been demonstrated that only the oil that is utilized contributes to the well-being of the human being or animal, it can readily be anticipated that compulsion to take such a toxic product could be very injurious. So that was here. Let me read the title of that paper just in case somebody wants to look it up. It was from the Journal of the American Dental Association, 1922, by Weston Price. Control of dental caries and some associated degenerative processes through reinforcement of the diet with special activators. So that was one. Let's see. Then we go to the next one. This one is from, let's see, this was published in JAMA. Let's go. Cod liver oil. Like many other food substances, they have at times been responsible for, quote, upsets in the allergic child, manifesting themselves in the form of vomiting, diarrhea, urticaria, that's a rash, eczema, and asthma, or in a combination of these syndromes. Because of this frequent complication, we have been searching for a product which could be given to children sensitive to cod liver oil whose diets for allergic reasons have been inadequate and who in addition have been unable to tolerate cod liver oil in any form. We wish to report the cases of 4 allergic children in whom, owing to the addition of cod liver oil to their diets, various types of allergic manifestations developed, other than the one for which they first came seeking relief. So that article was cod liver oil sensitivity in children, and that was another one that Weston Price was on. I'm trying to find that link. Let's see. And then where's another one? Okay, so this was from Nourishing Traditions. This is in the book. This is in the Weston Price Foundation's book, Nourishing Traditions, quoting Dr. Price. Quote, cod liver oil can be given in moderate doses without injury and to great advantage. Seldom, however, should the child be given more than 1 teaspoonful a day for extended periods because of toxic effects that often develop. And that was a letter to his nieces and nephews from 1934. So yeah, he knew, he had observed, just like I had, problems from, let's say, a high PUFA fish oil that contains a lot of vitamin A and a lot of vitamin D. And they noticed that it increased allergic manifestations in children. And that's been reproduced in all sorts of studies with kids, that the more vitamin A and the vitamin D you give kids, the more allergic they get. So yeah, so that's where I saw this. And the Weston Price Foundation, they're absolutely built upon their narrative, right? They can't get away from it. At this point, they can't say, if they were to say anything about people being able to make themselves toxic with natural vitamin A, could you imagine the like pitchforks and stuff? Yeah. People would be going crazy. So, yeah. So this whole like Weston Price thing, but I was into it. Like I said, I have learned so much in my time in this health field by making so many mistakes. I actually think that I'm blessed in that I can go in and start and try something. And I tend to, I'm lucky and blessed in the fact that I can recognize that it's not good for me sooner than most. Yeah. So I see the problems, I feel the problems, but I just don't keep going with it. Where a lot of my clients who come to me, sadly, they didn't recognize it, and so they messed themselves up a lot worse.
Yeah.
So
your curiosity and you know, the sort of way that you think is your insurance almost.
Yes, and my flaws are how I figured out. You want to hear one of the worst experiments I did in the vitamin A detox process was there was a study that showed that when people consumed alcohol, the vitamin A in their blood went up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought in the early days, this was a misinterpretation of the literature by me. I thought, okay, so alcohol's helping them to detox vitamin A out of their liver. It's not. It was just the alcohol kicks the vitamin A out for a bit. And then because the liver wants to process the alcohol first, because the alcohol can kill you. The vitamin A is a very slow death.
Yeah.
Alcohol can kill you in one night, right? Alcohol poisoning, you can just be dead in one night. So the body will prioritize the alcohol. It can't run all of it at once, so it brings in the alcohol to the liver to process, so you don't die, and it kicks out the vitamin A to make room for the alcohol. But I thought, as other people have misinterpreted since too, that alcohol is somehow helping to detox. Can you imagine the ludicrousness of this statement? Alcohol is helping to detox the liver. I mean, you hear that and you go, wait. I mean, any smart person, but see, we all get caught up in the theory. Even I've been caught up at once, but there was probably about 6 months where on a medicinal basis, I was doing like a shot of tequila in the morning and a shot at night, just like specifically that amount to try to detox faster. I think I probably set myself back a year. And so I try to tell people, like, people come out and everybody thinks they found something new that I've missed. And I'm like, no, we did that. Don't do that. Like, save yourself all this time and don't ruin your health further. It was just a misinterpretation of the research. And it sounds stupid on its face when I say it, but I went through it.
Dedication, man. Dedication.
See what I did, like, this is what I do as a quote unquote, if you want to call me a scientist, like good scientists always experiment on themselves first. They don't risk other people's health when they're not sure about it. So I did this whole experiment in silence. Like, I didn't tell anybody I was doing it because I didn't want other people to jump on it with me. And then later I came out and I told people, and I was like, yeah, this did not work. Was because I didn't want to tell people, like, go and drink alcohol to try to detox. I was like, let me see if this works. And nah. So I do these experiments. I have a small group of people who will do experiments with me. You know, they trust me, and they're like, they're experimental types. They're like, yeah, let me be part of this. And so those people, I'll have test out things with me if I feel like it's fairly proven, long-term safe, and they're into it. And I tell them, like, we're going to start slow. If anything goes wrong, you stop, and all that stuff. But yeah, so my flaws and my misinterpretations of certain things have, taught me a lot. I mean, that's how we learn, right? We learn by our mistakes.
Yeah.
I just try to keep my mistakes to only me before I let other people in on them.
Yeah. Nah, makes sense. I was going to ask you, so the vitamin A thing, I follow your work. I've been looking into your stuff for a long time, and it's definitely changed the way I look at things. And I like to see the debates. And to be honest with you, I've not really seen many people win the debate. I'm going to be honest, like, you come in heavy, and there's normally just a bunch of word salad and then a backing off, right? Or a blocking or something. But so I don't follow a low vitamin A diet. Because I got into the Weston A Price stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw really good results with my teeth. So I actually, and the question I'm going to ask you is kind of one question, but I want to kind of lead it down the teeth route in a second. But essentially, what I'm assuming you're suggesting here is vitamin A is fat soluble, and it ends up in the liver.
Yes.
And the more you eat, the more clogged up your liver is, and then the less it can actually function for the other toxins, day to day. So when you're taking alcohol, what it's doing is it's kicking out a lot of the toxins because it needs to deal with the immediate threat. And then what's happening is it's dealing with that, and then it's reabsorbing. So is it the blood goes through the liver every bloody hell, I knew the fact, but I forgot now. It's like every 3 minutes it goes through the liver again, the blood in the body. So it's like a fishing net. It's always just capturing, all
if you just think of it as a constant running pump, yeah, it's just constantly running through there. Yes.
So the more vitamin A you're getting over years, and you can't detox or remove vitamin A anywhere near as quickly as you can put it in. So it's just
correct.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little more complex than just vitamin A. The vitamin A, think of the vitamin A problem. It's a problem that we got two problems. People don't know it's necessarily a problem, and due to the health nuttery, they're emphasizing it, right? They're trying to take in even more. So your detox system, your liver mainly is the detox system, but it also includes your kidneys. Your skin can shove stuff out. You don't really want your skin having to shove out too many toxins, because then the toxins irritate your skin on the way out, and that's what we call skin disease. So like when your liver makes bile and you poop it out, the toxins are gone, right? When your kidneys make urine, the toxins leave. But when you push toxins out into your skin, they're sitting there just irritating your skin. So this is why with certain skin conditions, they'll tell you just got to wash, like with acne, they'll say you got to wash your face like twice a day, right? But what are you fixing the cause by washing your skin twice a day? No, you're just dealing with the symptom. You're just dealing with the irritant coming out. So I think I kind of lost your question there.
So the clogging up of the liver, basically.
Oh, okay. So lots of things you can look up liver injury or cholestasis. Tons of things can cause liver injury. That can be pharmaceuticals. It could be jabs. It could be toxins like glyphosate, pesticides. It can be herbs damaging the liver. It can be overdosing on vitamins. It can be all sorts of things. So generally you want to think of taking testosterone. It could be all sorts of things. All these things, the liver has to process them. Generally, if the liver's overloaded, it starts accumulating things. You start accumulating toxins in your body fat too. And the crappy thing is that as you get more toxic, your detox system slows down. So your detox system slows down. So that means you get more toxic on lower exposures. So it's like a vicious cycle. Detox slows down, you build up more toxins, it affects your detox system more, it slows down more, and just on and on and on. So with vitamin A, like people, let's say they get sick and they get on a health kick, and then all of a sudden they go and they want to do like this they want to juice carrots, they want to start eating liver, they want to start do all these high vitamin A things. And yes, I will admit to you what you're saying about people short term will sometimes see amazing benefits from vitamin A. I mean, isn't that why they give people Accutane, right? Is because short term, there can be amazing effects. But what does Accutane do long term to people? It absolutely ruins their life. Accutane, the 13-cis-retinoic acid that is Accutane, some of the vitamin A you eat turns into exactly that same compound in your system. So if you're eating vitamin A, you're basically taking Accutane and you're taking retin-A, isotretinoin and tretinoin. Your body absolutely makes those. This is in the biochemistry books. This is why I try to tell people, like, these are really dangerous drugs, and chemically, like, scientists cannot tell a difference between a natural one and one that's synthetic. Your body can't tell the difference if the scientists can't tell the difference. So we get into this problem of the long-term damage to your liver. And so then if your liver's slowing down, people will get into taking herbs to try to speed up their liver, right? Or they'll try to eat foods that just for some reason on the internet, they'll say this food is good for cleansing your liver. And I'm always like, can I get a reference on that one? Like, what, do we just make up stuff out of thin air? Like, this cleans your liver. The best way to clean your liver, so if your liver's overloaded and the overload is making your liver slower, and the slow liver is causing more things to accumulate, which is then damaging the liver, and it's this vicious cycle. The main thing that we can do is to remove or reduce the daily poisons that we put in. That's the biggest thing we can do. We got to get the poisons to not enter the system, because your body's getting rid of some of the garbage. It just can't keep up with the amount of garbage that's being put in. And the only way it can start to recover is less garbage being put in. So Does vitamin A aggravate this? Yes. Humans can tolerate a certain amount of vitamin A. Actually, somebody posted on my Twitter the other day about these scientists were asking, why does the body have this detox system when in a natural, like when they were talking about like cavemen or whatever, they're like, they wouldn't have been exposed to very much of this. Like, why does the body have this detox system? Because it's really toxic. And the body doesn't want it. So I don't know if you've seen my vitamin A deficiency is a myth thread, but I go over in that where they've shown people with no vitamin A in their systems, barely any, or they've shown newborns with like no vitamin A in their liver, and they have no health problems. So like we can go and demonstrate that the human body to be healthy needs no vitamin A. But yeah, the vitamin A problem is, there was actually a paper I posted from the early 80s where the doctors were saying with the rise in like Accutane and vitamin A supplements and they're like, we are on the verge of a vitamin A toxicity epidemic. And they said this 40 years ago. And here I am today saying, here it is. And I can show it in liver biopsy studies that it's just getting worse.
Wow.
And now conspiracy wise, we start to see that even in the US, they don't require them to label vitamin A anymore. You don't have to put it on a nutrition label anymore, because the weird thing is they say that Americans don't have vitamin A deficiency generally. It's not something we have to worry about. So I then say, if we don't have to worry about deficiency, what's the only other thing that's left then? It's toxicity, right?
Yeah.
So, but don't tell people how much vitamin A is in there, because you don't want them to start realizing that they might be poisoning themselves. So
is there no quicker way to cause like a liver dump, like
a bile dump?
Yeah, like people do these like Epsom salts, and they do I think olive oil's one. Would you stay clear of anything like that? Your view is be natural, stop feeding toxins, and let the body do its thing. Like, is there any hacks you're aware of?
Are there any hacks, right? Are there any short-term things? So
we want quick and we want easy. What we got?
Strong medicine is going to have strong effects for better or worse. So I just remind people of that. So like I talk to people about, so we're getting a little bit into toxic bile theory, and the way your body's going to get rid of most of these toxins in the liver is it puts them into bile. And what is supposed to happen with bile is it's supposed to go into your intestines, and then you reabsorb a certain percentage of it. On a standard American diet, they say you reabsorb about 95% of the bile. So the bile is the most toxic fluid in your body by definition. And you recycle 95% of it. So this is why people stay toxic and they don't get better. But we try to poop out the bile. That's how we get rid of this toxic. I call the bile the liver's poop, basically. So we want the liver to poop, and then we want you to poop. So you poop out the bile. We do things to accelerate the excretion of bile by doing things like soluble fiber. This is like where I talk to the strict carnivores, like the all muscle meat carnivores. If I talk to them about, if you can just add some like psyllium or some other form of soluble fiber to your diet, it'll both feed your gut biome, the bifido particularly. A very low carb diet will absolutely decimate bifido populations. And this has been shown in the literature without a doubt. So we give the bifido some food with some soluble fiber. We help soak up bile with the soluble fiber. We give them, oftentimes a little better bile movement with it. And it's just a simple tweak to their dietary strategy that helps get vitamin A out. There's charcoal. If people are pooping well enough, they can use charcoal. Charcoal soaks up bile. That's in the literature. So then, what's that? Use it all the time? Yeah.
Yeah, when I was drinking, if I went out and drank loads, I'd take it at night, and I'd take it in the morning. If I ate a dodgy takeaway, I'd take it. If I went to the sauna, I'd take it. If I'm into Muay Thai, so if I sweat a lot, I take it then as well. So anything that's sort of like really burning fat, because when if you went keto, for instance, you burn a lot of fat, and those toxins are recycling. And so yeah, but I learned a lot of that from your work actually.
Okay.
So yeah, I love activated charcoal. I take it all the time.
Yeah, I tell people, like, the more activated charcoal you can take and still poop regularly, the sooner you're going to be better. But if people are if they're constipated already and they're taking activated charcoal and they're stopping it up even more, that's not going to help. So the reason why, so what the just back to the toxic bile theory about causing disease, what happens is, so there's this issue called cholestasis, which is where the bile goes in directions and leaks into places it's not supposed to be, particularly the blood. So the bile can go back up into the stomach. That's nausea, heartburn, GERD, acid reflux, as they call it. And then I've actually shown it. Hold on. Excuse me. I've shown it in the research.
That's you.
I've shown in the research that the stomach can actually reabsorb bile, like take it right into the bloodstream. So leaky gut is actually caused by toxic bile. Bile eats through it can eat through just about everything it's exposed to. I've shown that it can eat through the liver cells that make it. It can eat through the tiny bile ducts inside the liver. It can eat through the big bile ducts. It eats through the intestines. It can go back up into the stomach and be absorbed. So then once it's in the bloodstream, this most toxic fluid in our entire body can then go everywhere in the body. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So this is chronic disease. This is people's chronic disease. And when they talk about I need a detox, what they really mean is they're leaking toxic bile into their system and they're trying to find a way to stop it. So what can we do? Like, I'm not, okay. I'm very careful with my wording on this stuff. I'm going to go over one method that people can use to get toxic bile out of them in a quick shot, but it's a very, I call this a sledgehammer approach. Okay. Coffee enemas.
Oh, I knew you was going to say that.
Well, I've never done one. I'm probably never going to do one in my life. I tell people, like, if you're into them and you're willing to do it.
A little thing going in your bum or.
Yeah. I'm just, it's not my thing, but some people are like, oh, they've done them in the past. And they're just like, oh, they're fine with it. And I'm like, okay, if you're cool with it, go ahead. I'm not going to put up like a how-to because I've never done it. So think about this, a coffee enema. So this is, you got to follow the ideas here. So you put coffee up there. Coffee is bitter. Coffee causes a bile dump. This is why a lot of people, like, they kind of rely on coffee for their first bowel movement of the day. The bitterness of coffee and the stimulant effect of it causes a bile dump. Bile is actually the trigger by which we poop. I've shown studies on constipated people have less bile in their poop. Diarrhea folks have the most bile in their poop. And so normal people, normal poopers, they have a middle ground. So we start getting into the constipation and that stuff. So they take a bitter liquid up into their intestines. Their body registers it. They say it triggers them to dump bile. They dump bile into the intestines. So now they have a lot of bile there. They have a bitter toxin. They have a lot of water. The body says, okay, let's just get rid of all this stuff. And so then they have loose bowels. Basically, you induce loose bowels with an enema. And they have taken that one dump of bile and they have evacuated it. So that's kind of a sledgehammer approach to it. Now, I don't know how much of that coffee is being absorbed, but it's not zero. And some people, like, I have clients who have, let's say, a migraine. They're still getting better, but they still have migraines. And I'll tell them, like, if you want to do a coffee enema when you have a migraine, go ahead. And a lot of people, it'll knock them out of their hours and hours long migraine in like an hour or 2 or 3. So it can greatly accelerate things.
Doesn't it increase the glutathione production by like 700% as well?
But why would the body? So you always have to think about this. Like, why would the body increase glutathione to taking coffee up your butt? Well, I mean, really think about that. Like, you're going, okay, so why would coffee increase glutathione? Why would the body push out one of its big detox substances when you take in what I'm calling a toxin? right? So it's like when people will say, I saw a Ray Peat quote once. He said, caffeine raises the xanthine oxidase activity in your body. And he thought that was a really great thing. Well, caffeine is a xanthine. So caffeine is detoxed by xanthine oxidase. So if you take in caffeine and the detox enzyme ramps up its activity, it's ramping it up because you took in a toxin, right?
Yeah,
so if people were to say your ADH, your alcohol dehydrogenase, and your ALDH go up when you drink alcohol, so your alcohol detox pathway ramps up when you drink alcohol. Well, you go, well, that makes sense. You just drank alcohol. You got to detox it, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody puts coffee up their rear and part of their detox system ramps up, is it because you put in a toxin? Do we want to try to ramp up the detox pathways by taking in toxins? Does that make sense? No. It doesn't make sense to me. So, but can people evacuate a bolus of bile, a portion of bile very quickly? The cool thing about, let's say, a coffee enema is the bile that comes down into the gut, when you evacuate it, it's gone.
Yeah.
That's the good thing. Because normally like 95%-ish of it would be reabsorbed. So you can just put it in there and get it out. So it is one way. I've had people who do those liver and gallbladder flushes who said they got a lot of benefit from it. Like you were talking about with, usually it's like either fasting for a couple days or doing apples or doing apple juice or whatever. And so they kind of, what they're doing, so they're kind of eating very light on fat, very light on protein for several days before. Okay, so what does that do? I'm going to tell you what it does. You store up your bile. You're not dumping bile because you're not eating very much. So you're kind of storing up all that bile. And then when it comes time, right, you're going to drink like Epsom salts and olive oil. So Epsom salts are known to cause, like, it's a laxative, right?
Yeah.
Olive oil you drink enough fat and everybody knows it's a laxative too. But olive oil will cause the big bile dump.
Yeah.
So you're doing a concerted effort to save up your bile for a couple days, and then all at once you take something that dumps the bile and then gives you diarrhea, so you poop it out. And that's it. When people say they see gallstones in there, those are not gallstones. That's a combination of the olive oil and the Epsom salts and the bile. That's it.
Really?
So it's just you. So these funny things that get a good reputation in the health community, coffee enemas, and let's say this liver and gallbladder flushes, which can go bad. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of people out there who say, I did this and I felt worse. So, but when we understand toxic bile theory and how we're trying to get the bile out, it starts to make sense of what they're actually doing. And that it's the bile that is holding all these poisons, and we want that out. Yeah. You can do it slow. Like if you want to do the sledgehammer approach, where you're basically inducing diarrhea both of these ways, you can do it. But if you don't stop putting the poisons in, you're not going to get as far as you could if you stop putting the poisons in as well. So those are just kind of like accelerators. The long-term stuff is like the soluble fiber and the charcoal.
What do you take for fiber? Is there a certain food or is there a certain supplement or?
So what we kind of use generally on the program, I mean, the highest soluble fiber foods, I mean, every food you eat that has, so I'm not like a crazy high fiber person. Different people, depending upon the state of their gut biome and the state of their digestion, some people do better with more, some people do better with less. I have some people who get neurological symptoms if they take in any fiber. So he's like, don't take it. I tell that guy, you're not ready for it. Don't do it. But the highest soluble fiber foods are apples, oats, barley, and beans as a general rule. Pears have a decent amount too, but pears can have a formaldehyde problem if they're too ripe. So those are the biggest soluble fiber foods. And then there's charcoal. So a lot of people on our program, really try to emphasize those foods. Like we talk about the cowboy diet. People don't realize this, but the cowboys of America back in the day, like their main diet was beef and beans. That's what they ate. These were like some of the toughest guys around, and that's and they ate an extremely low vitamin A diet that's almost like a vitamin A detox diet. We have some people who do a lot of, oats and apples. Yeah, I talk about this in terms of different people can figure out what works for them. Like I love beans in terms of the soluble fiber, but I don't eat that many of them because they don't agree with me that much.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm like 97.5% Northern European. There was not a lot of beans up in like Norway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I don't get along with them, I tell people, like, if you don't get along with them, then don't eat them, but just try the different sources. Like I do great on apples. I love apples and they sit really well.
Is that an apple a day?
Yes. Oh yeah. That's one thing. I did go through the research. Apples in the research are by far the healthiest fruit ever shown. None of these superfoods and all this crap. If you want to know which fruit to eat to be healthy long term, it's apples. The research backs it up. The funny thing is the three of the fruits that I do use a lot, apples, bananas, and pears, are the three healthiest fruits. And so bananas have the most potassium, apples and pears have the most pectin, which is the soluble fiber. And these are things that I use in the program. So it all starts to kind of make sense when you understand what we need and what we're lacking.
Yeah. I'm like you, I'm Northern European and I've got a RO blood type. So I don't do well on beans and legume, like things like this. I don't do well on. I do really well on meat.
Yeah.
You won't like this part because you'll probably suggest that in time it will kick me up the arse, but I do really well on dairy as well.
Okay.
I can just digest it really well. I guess in years to come, I've got your number just in case. But yeah, that's really interesting. I was gonna say,
well, you are also taking a lot of charcoal, so maybe that's saving your butt right now.
Could do. Maybe I need to start doing some coffee enemas as well. Maybe that's the. I was gonna say, I wanted to sort of draw it back to this as well. So you kept mentioning at the beginning of the conversation about calcification.
Yes.
And I said obviously coffee, tea, and certain things. You mentioned vitamin D and vitamin A.
Yes.
They can cause calcification. So there's definitely an issue, and I had an issue with this as well. I went to a holistic dentist, and we've looked through my family history, and essentially, some people, they won't notice until they end up with like osteoporosis when they're 60 or 70 or arthritis or whatever. Other people, it manifests in their teeth, or it could be clicky joints and bad, knees and whatever. But essentially, your body's always decalcifying. Well, it's pulling calcium out of the bones, and it's how much you can actually sort of get that calcium back in the bones where it should be. So things like magnesium. I'm guessing this is why you're really keen on magnesium as well. And yes. K2, you talk a lot about K2 and the link of vitamin A. Once you remove vitamin A, you need less K2, I think you said, or it's easier to utilize K2. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of go through that a little bit as well, and your whole idea, because a lot of people get into Weston A Price because of the teeth situation.
Yes. And
I actually did get results, but I'm not 100% sold on the fact that that's the only way. I think there's probably going to be other ways, and as you've mentioned in the past with the vitamin A and the vitamin K2 and all of this kind of link. So can we kind of go into that and what you would suggest to someone like me, who actually did quite well on the Weston A Price diet whilst I did it, but actually has had issues in the past where my teeth have demineralized and I have had issues before. So I need to walk a tightrope, really between different diets, because I'm always a bit cautious of what's going to happen with the teeth going forward.
Okay. So
there's a loaded question there. Sorry about that.
That's a big question. Well, so one of the things we know about vitamin A, there are studies, especially in Scandinavian countries, where they showed that people who ate more than 3,000 units of vitamin A a day, which is not much at all. A lot of people would eat that at breakfast, caused more bone loss, more osteoporosis. Vitamin A, vitamin A toxicity causes what's called hypercalcemia, excess calcium in the blood, and that is because it is pulling calcium directly out of the bone.
Yeah.
Once calcium goes, this is just kind of a basic for all the calcification stuff, is once the calcium comes out of the bones, it's in the blood, and then your body desperately has to get that calcium out of the blood, or else it goes to the heart and the brain, and then it causes basically malfunctions there. It changes how they function. So that's why what the body will do to get that calcium out of the blood is it will shove it into soft tissues. Your brain, your bones, your muscles, your joints, it will calcify that stuff. And for people who don't understand this problem, like when you go and you get an X-ray for a problem in a certain area, assuming we're not talking about a broken bone or something, but when you go to get an X-ray, right, the bones show up really bright, right? And then the doctors are generally looking for other bright areas that are not supposed to be there on your X-ray. Well, what are they looking at? They're looking at calcification. So like most human diseases have some basis in excess calcium in an area. Like that's how they find when they see a mammography, when they're looking for breast cancer, right? They look for bright spots. They're looking for calcifications in the breast tissue is really what they're looking for. So calcification is a really big deal. Vitamin D, when you have vitamin D toxicity, especially from supplements, it causes high blood calcium, hypercalcemia, and it causes low blood potassium. So the potassium is kind of a secondary thing, but the high calcium is that I've got research showing copper toxicity will cause calcifications. The things that we use to generally fix these calcifications, I mean, it's pretty simple. We do a low vitamin A diet. We don't take vitamin D supplements. We don't try to eat vitamin D. We try to get out in the sun or get UVB light regularly. If to tolerance. So if somebody, I've had 2 people this last week who are so toxic. Something for people to know is if you're really sensitive to the sun, whether it's your vision's really sensitive to bright lights or your skin's really sensitive to bright lights, like you burn easily, things like that, you have a lot of that person has a lot of toxicity in their skin. Because what happens is the sun is basically oxidizing those toxins in your skin, and it's floating out in your system, and it's causing damage in the skin. That's a sunburn. But then that also, most of the time when people get a sunburn, right, they also feel awful for days. They just oxidized all those toxins in their skin, made them worse, and now they're dumping them back into their system. So we store a lot of vitamin A in our skin. I believe it's so the body can break it, the sun can break it down to get rid of it. It's one way the body can detox it. Oxidizing, here's the crazy thing. With vitamin A and other toxins, oxidizing them, putting them down the detox pathway, they actually become more toxic as they go down the detox pathway. It makes no sense. People are like, why did God design us this way? And I say, I have no idea. It's just the nature of the beast. It's just what happens. So we try to get so magnesium. If you have enough magnesium in solution in your body solutions, your body fluids, that can actually dissolve calcifications. So we are huge on topical magnesium in our program, whether that's magnesium baths, magnesium foot soaks, magnesium oil, the sprays typically, or magnesium lotion. We're about to come out with our own magnesium lotion here within weeks. That's been a long time coming. That's super exciting. But we do magnesium. We don't take in the excess calcium things. We don't have people take calcium supplements. I actually think, so here's a different theory on bone calcification. The problem with losing bone is that the bone is not holding on to the calcium it already has, right? Because we've already hit our peak bone density. We hit that mid-20s or something like that. We've hit our peak bone density. And so the body is not holding on to it well. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a lack of calcium or a lack of things that raise calcium in the blood. It's that we are not holding on to it. So what does medicine try to do? Well, medicine gives us vitamin A, which pulls calcium out of bones. I've actually shown long-term studies on vitamin D, giving vitamin D supplements in men, it lowered their bone density. So we've just been told like complete lies. They're not looking at long-term. They're looking at short-term. And then so much of the population's magnesium deficient that what I'm trying to do. So like if you show like if people start taking vitamin A, vitamin D, and these other things, and then they're taking more calcium, they're putting tons of calcium into the blood. So then what does the body do? It puts it into soft tissue, because if you don't do that, it's going to cause your heart to have problems. You could have a heart attack. You could have a stroke. You could have all sorts of problems. Now, vitamin K, I've got research showing vitamin A very distinctly lowers vitamin K in animals. They actually said to induce a simple vitamin K deficiency, you can just use vitamin A in mice or rats. I forget which one it was. We're normally supposed to, this is one thing that the Weston Price organization kind of overlooks, and a lot of people overlook, is we are supposed to make our own vitamin K in our gut. The gut bacteria make vitamin K for us, and then we absorb it.
Wow.
People don't talk about that. Like why is vitamin K in cheese? Because it's been fermented in the in the cow, right? I mean, not fermented, but it's been processed by the gut bacteria in the cow. So what we see on my program, because what causes a problematic gut biome? What messes up your gut biome? Toxic bile, vitamin A, all these other toxins ruin your gut bacteria. So as we fix the gut and we fix the gut bacteria and the toxic bile becomes less toxic, all of a sudden your gut bacteria start making more vitamin K. And so we might have people on vitamin K towards the start of the program because they might benefit. They might have vitamin K deficiency symptoms, and we give them some vitamin K and it helps with their symptoms.
Yeah.
But over time, they're going to have to, well, they don't have to, but they're not going to need it. We find that they don't need it.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. So yeah, so it's pretty cool. We're just restoring the way the body's supposed to function. And,
isn't there a link as well with EMFs and the calcium channel, magnesium calcium channel, and K2 can actually help to stop the release of calcium from the cell due to EMFs?
I have not seen that actual research. I have not looked into that. I have not been made aware of that. I did a whole video on my YouTube, which is just Nutrition Detective, about EMFs and calcium channels and all that stuff. I mean, anything that's affecting calcium flow in the body is affecting calcium channels. But does EMF absolutely mess with calcium channels? Yes. Could I show in the research that vitamin A messes with calcium channels? Yep. I've actually posted research in that video about how when the calcium channels are not firing properly, or when you have iron overload or copper toxicity, that iron and copper can move through those calcium channels. Yeah. So you have stuff moving through the calcium channels that's not supposed to move through them. And it just so happens to be part of the like trio of, excess calcium and excess iron and excess copper that I'm fixing in people all the time. So there's a lot of cool stuff in that EMF video. People might want to go check that out.
Damn.
But vitamin K is something I have people take it if they have symptoms related to vitamin K deficiency, bruising problems, bleeding problems, sensitive teeth, that kind of stuff. So vitamin K, I use it to help people who have sensitive teeth or they have teeth issues. I give them the option of taking vitamin K and seeing if it helps. And if it does, I tell them, go ahead and use it. I actually do have people. The cool thing about teeth is this may be part of what dairy did for you, is you can actually expose. So teeth are basically exposed bone, right? You can expose. So if the teeth are not being built properly with enough calcium in them, you can actually apply calcium from the outside to them. Like the website is calciumtherapy.com. They actually make products with calcium and zinc in them that you brush your teeth with, and it applies calcium to the teeth and it can fix it. And then you don't have to put calcium internally to screw up everything internally. You can just apply it to the teeth. And
one of the things I did which helped a lot is pearl powder. Yeah. I'm messing around with a bit of pearl powder. But every time I eat as well, I use the topical magnesium. I spray 30, 40 sprays a day. I love it. Yeah. Every time I eat, I'll just spray a bit in my mouth, give it a swish, get rid of that as well. Obviously, it drops the pH of the mouth, and again, just driving calcium in.
Yeah. So that's the cool thing about the teeth is you can do things directly to the outside of the teeth. I'll actually have people, if they have sensitive teeth, with the vitamin K2 drops, put them on their finger and just rub them on the teeth.
Really?
And that helps a lot. Yeah.
Well, because they say, teeth is like, they'll say it's like a dead bone, basically, right? But then in the next breath, they'll say, don't brush your teeth 20 minutes, until 20 minutes after eating, because your teeth become porous because of the acidity. And this is something that I found really interesting, right? So a dead body, the teeth no longer rot.
Right.
Because they're not being demineralized and remineralized. So if you look at it that way, because you can find a skull 1,000 years old and it's still got teeth.
Right.
Whereas you got people who are, eating and teeth are rotting away in their head. So they're definitely living 100%. I can't go with that idea. It just doesn't make any sense. But I've got a list of topics here. I'm thinking, should we do another one eventually?
We can do another one of these. I'd be happy to do another one. Yeah.
We've not even got on to what you like to call pokey. I mean, that was a big topic. I wanted to, when we're talking about the toxins and the bile theory and all of this. I mean, there's so many factors here. We've just gone over diet, but there's so many more topics. I wanted to talk to you about ivermectin.
Yeah.
I mean, we could be here for another 2 hours. So
easily.
I'm very cautious of your time. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Do you know, maybe we should do a conversation talking about the pokey.
Yeah.
And ivermectin, because what I like, something that you've been saying quite often is that's a way that they've almost caught both sides.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
No, because if you're not taking that, then you're probably taking that. Maybe we'll save that for another time. But that would be, I'd love to. Yeah, I've achieved what I wanted out of this conversation. I wanted to open you up, and I wanted you to just really. Because on Twitter, you can't talk a lot on Twitter. You've got to be straight to the point.
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of people that look into your work know your connection with Weston A Price. So you've now sort of said that in the open. You've shown that you speak from experience. A lot of the things you're talking about, it's not because I've read a study somewhere and I'm sat on PubMed just, attaching my bias to whatever. Right. You've actually got experience and it's led you to where you are. So, yeah, it's been great in that sense, but I'd love to, really go into that as well, because I'm sure you've got a lot of interesting things to say on that.
Yeah, love to. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to cover, or are you happy to? It's been a hell of a show, man. Are you happy to sort of leave it there, or?
Yeah. Just if people want to, I do a live stream every week on YouTube. It's called the Love Your Liver live stream. That's kind of, I go and I take questions and I go over topics for like 2 hours. And so if people want to go get more, there's that. Obviously, there's the Twitter stuff. For those of who like it, please share this, because it seems that the powers that be really are trying to suppress it. I've been figuring out how we've been suppressed on certain social media channels. So we're trying to work around that so it doesn't get out there unless people share it with others. But in terms of other stuff today, no, I think we kind of covered it. I try not to open up too many rabbit holes, because as you can see, they get really deep really fast, and it's hard to get me to shut up.
Well, I don't think you talk about things that you don't understand. And if you don't understand it, you're generally pretty clear on that. But I noticed when I threw something in there, you're willing to go. So I've got to be careful. I only had a certain amount of topics, and we've only covered half. Yeah. But the information you've given has been amazing. But I think more than anything is you've really shown who you are and how you think and how you come to these conclusions. You've been very bubbly and smiley and happy on Twitter. I'm the same. You could look at my Twitter and go, this guy, he just wants to argue all the time. But I'm not like that in real life. I'm very open. But it's really hard to express yourself on a Twitter thread. And I won't go premium. I don't want to do it. I don't want to pay the money. So I've got less characters than you've got.
Right. So, well, I would say the thing about me on Twitter and other places like that is I don't want to be. As you're saying, I come off as very serious. I come off as very straightforward and very serious. And I feel like I must do that because I don't want to be making jokes and be sarcastic and have people who maybe miss the sarcasm or miss the joke think I'm being serious. Like I take my responsibility to people to give them the right information and to give them the truth as I understand it. Like I want to do that very, very clearly. And people have no idea. Like I do. I am pretty smiley. That's where people can see it more on the, there's just so much more we can do, face to face and talking versus just typing it out. So yeah, typing it out, I tend to be very straightforward and very, like, I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying. I want to be very clear about it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like this, I wanted this conversation to be one that hopefully people will share to get to know you and really to kind of go in. I've not been doing this channel for long. I started it actually, I'll just give you a bit of history. So I did a crypto channel. This was years ago. And we're talking about the Great Reset and all of this stuff years ago, 5-6 years ago, before all the COVID stuff. And all the stuff we were talking about, it's sort of playing out, which is scary. But I think I was completely wrong on crypto. I thought it was a good thing. I'm now looking at it years later and I'm like, what? I can't even think back to what I used to talk about because it just cringes me out. But anyway, we built up a channel. We were very popular. We were making money off the channel, and it was doing really well. Anyway, that's the past. We shut that down. We moved on. I had a Twitter account that was doing really well, and that during COVID I lost it. So I lost all those followers. I then set up another one. I got to 3,000 or 4,000 again quickly. Lost that again.
Did they shut you down?
Yeah, I just got booted off there. Just
oh wow.
See you later. One of them was arguing. I said something I shouldn't have, and I had multiple warnings, so that's fine. The other one, it was gone. And I set this podcast up, and this was during the COVID lockdown. And we got a few hundred subscribers quickly, and we did a few episodes that were really
episode
good,
6.
One of them was
on today's episode, we interviewed Dr. aka interview nutritional Garret, who also runs a program called the Love Your Liver program. This interview is quite fascinating. We cover a lot of topics. I'm not even going to break down exactly what we cover because there's so much. But we sort of start with his view and understanding on nutrition, going into things like bile theory and the WEF. We talk about the Weston A Price Foundation. We talk about something that's quite near to my heart is Ramel Nagel and what happened to him. I was a big fan of Ramel Nagel, and the cod liver oil and fish oils. So strap in, enjoy the ride. This is one hell of a show.
You're, very in depth with your research. You're very serious about what you're doing. So I've managed to get hold of some really good guests. So I don't really have the following yet, but I think interviews like this will get there. And I want this to be a very credible place where I'm not just interviewing, we talk about this false light thing. And me and Mark spoke a lot about that in the last interview because he's, really into the new age and he's really good. I'll share you one of his interviews actually where he goes into this, and he was talking about this years ago. But I don't want it to be like this gimmicky thing where I'm getting on all these personalities on Twitter and, I want to interview serious people, and I want this place to be a place where you can go and cut through all the bullshit. So where I'm going, I appreciate you coming on. I think you're definitely one of those guys, and you've added a lot of value. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah. Good stuff. Take care, and hopefully we'll do it again. We got so much to go over. We need to put the world to rights, man. Me and you, we've got this.
Happy to do it, man.
All right. Take care, man.
Okay. Bye.